universality of Catholic education. I know in your program it says the universality of Catholic education, African experience. I wish to clarify that in the 2 hours from now, we shall be looking at that topic in 2 ways. And the first is the experience from South Africa, and the second one will be the Ugandan experience. I would like that, as indicated in the program, we begin with the South African experience, and therefore I would like to introduce the presenter for that, who is Anne Baker. Anne Baker, feel most welcome. We are all ears. We wish to hear what happens in South Africa. Let me say a few things about our presenter. Like I have said, her name is Anne Baker. Anne Baker is currently the Deputy Director, Catholic Institute of Education of South Africa. She is a holder of a master's degree in education leadership. She facilitates courses in leadership and restorative justice, and has a vast knowledge in policy and advocacy, and also in biblical and religious studies. Anne Baker is a proud mother of 4, and she's a grandmother of 9. 9. And join me in welcoming her by giving her one clap. Let's go. Karibu, Anne.
Although I don't see our Reverend Lord Bishops present today, I greet them, but I greet you, the most honorable delegates, with my whole heart. And I greet you in the language of my country. Sambenono, Molweni, Dumilang, Abshen, Goeiemorgen, Tobelang, good morning. Jambo. It is a great privilege and honor for me to be with you today. I am so very, very pleased that I am able to be here, and I thank my good friend Augusta for inviting me. This is my second visit to your beautiful land. I was here in 2007 for an International Catholic Education Office Council meeting. It was then that I was able to experience something of a sort of a strange experience, because from a very young girl, I heard about Kenya and its beauty from my father, who was an Air Force mechanic here during the Second World War. When we went to Nakuru, where he had been stationed, I felt quite a bond. That's a strange thing to describe. And when I got home, and by then he was an old man, he was so thrilled to know that one member of his family had been there. Today I will be sharing some thoughts and facts about the universality of Catholic education and Catholic education in South Africa. The new logo for our institute, the Catholic Institute of Education, is the scallop shell. The scallop shell is traditionally used on the Camino de Santiago, a pilgrimage which is known by the English names of the Way of St. James or St. James Path. The significance of the shell started out as souvenirs for pilgrims, which they probably collected along the shore. The scallop shell acts as a metaphor for the pilgrim. The grooves in the shell, which meet at a single point, represent various routes. Various routes which pilgrims traveled from Spain, France, Portugal, and eventually arriving at a single destination, the tomb of St. James in the great cathedral in Santiago. This pilgrimage has taken place since ancient times. And it is a pilgrimage is a journey with a sacred purpose. During such a walk, people grow in understanding of self and their connection to the earth and God. And this is why we chose this symbol for Catholic Education Network in South Africa. Education is a lifetime's journey, a lifetime's pilgrimage. Children enter our schools, spend time growing, and eventually go out into the world along their own paths. And our great task is to accompany and guide the pupils while they are with us, to walk the way of Jesus with them. To walk with worn-out feet, tired feet, but to keep walking this pilgrimage. We need to go back a bit and reflect on how we, people here, Africans all dedicated to Catholic schools, come to be in those schools today. It is, of course, the universal message of Jesus Christ and how it reached our lands that brings us together. We know from Scripture that Philip gave the good news to the Ethiopian, who was the first African Christian, and who would undoubtedly have taken the message home to his people and his land. The apostles spread the message of Jesus throughout the then known world, and tradition suggests that Mark brought Christianity to Africa in 60 AD, making Christian communities in Africa possibly the earliest in the world outside Israel. The command to go out and make Christians of all nations was taken seriously and continues to this day. Much has been written and said about the effects of missionaries intertwined with colonialism and how this impacted indigenous peoples. But this is a subject for another day. It is, however, pertinent to the subject of Catholic education and the universality of it to speak about it. The institution school has existed since ancient Greek and Roman times. During the Middle Ages in Europe, there were many schools attached to monasteries and cathedrals to teach future monks, clergy, and administrators, and was therefore for the chosen few, and then only for men. The oldest known school to still be operating was started in 597 BC, or the Common Era as it's known today. And this school continues educating young people in the United Kingdom. Of course, it originally was a Catholic school, but after the disbandment of the monasteries and everything, it became an Anglican school. This makes our school seem rather young. And of course, I'm not sure how old your oldest school is. Perhaps someone can tell us hereafter. While Catholic schools might have existed for centuries, the missionaries mentioned earlier were instrumental in developing schools in our lands, schools which since their inception have been beacons of hope and schools of excellence, and dare I say, hubs of integrity. Cohesion around Catholic schools began in about 1588, and it was more than Catholic schools. It was also Catholic universities, when Pope Sixtus instituted a congregation to supervise universities in Rome and other Italian cities. Thereafter, the Congregation for Catholic Education was established, and here we see the two leaders of it at present, His Excellency Monsignor Giuseppe Versaldi and Archbishop Angelo Vincenzo Zani, both of whom are very passionate about Catholic education. We turn now to the Vatican documents. These are the documents that really show and connect us to each other. After the Second Vatican Council, a very important document, Gravissimum Educationis, aimed to show the baptized the importance of education, and aimed to draw the attention of all to the importance of education. It provides basic guidelines on educational issues. The document was not intended to give answers to all issues facing education, but to be passed on to post-conciliar structures for discussion. And out of this came the Congregation for Catholic Education. This congregation brings together seminaries, universities, and schools. So all of us and this university where we are today are part of this universal congregation. Through the congregation, we have been blessed with a comprehensive body of documents which give direction and guidance to us. They give guidance on the philosophy of and the underpinning reasons for the existence of a Catholic school. From the 1977 document entitled The Catholic School to the 2015 document Educating Today and Tomorrow, A Renewing Passion, and all documents in between, we are given, as I said, clear guidelines and rationale for the Catholic school. And we just need to read the following titles to know that a wealth of information awaits us. Unfortunately, earlier documents are not particularly accessible in English. This would make a great job for an English teacher who retires to rewrite the documents in more accessible language. Because we are guided by these documents, we are linked across the world. The very reason for a Catholic school can be understood by all who work or come into contact with it, a true sign of the universality. The documents are also very apt in their analysis of the world and the issues affecting education around the world. The Catholic school on the threshold of the third millennium tells us the following. The Catholic school sets out to be a school for the human person and of human persons. The person of each individual human being in his or her material and spiritual needs is at the heart of Christ's teaching. This is why the promotion of the human person is the goal of the Catholic school. Education Today and Tomorrow, a Renewing Vision, was developed on the 50th anniversary of the document I mentioned earlier from Vatican II. And it talks about building an educational context and creating a climate where not only teaching and learning take place, but where values are lived. Another link to your conference theme. I would like to emphasize the word climate, because climate is another word we use is ethos. But climate says what the experience of both the pupils and the teachers is in a Catholic school, and how pastoral care takes place. This climate should be a climate of care, kindness, and respect. And I think each of us know whether or not that exists either within our school or within the individual classrooms in our school. And as principals, this is one of your greatest challenges, is keeping the climate what it should be. A further study of the documents leads us to ask or look for a clear definition of the Catholic school. There is a large body of writing on the school, and I'm sure the library of this great university is filled with many of these books. Professor Thomas Groom, a well-known Catholic scholar who is an expert on Catholic school, offers us the following. The distinctiveness of Catholic education is prompted by the distinctive characteristics of Catholicism itself, and these characteristics should be reflected in the whole curriculum of the Catholic school. Groom offers 5 theological characteristics of a Catholic school. It's positive anthropology of the person. In other words, people are good, and we need to look for the good and recognize the good in each other, to really look for goodness in people. It's sacramentality of life. Of course, we can all say all life is sacred, but do we really own that concept? Do we look for it and acknowledge it? Pope Francis's document, Laudato Si, leads us to appreciate the sacredness of the earth, and is something we really need to develop in our young people. Its communal emphasis regarding human and Christian existence. We are communal creatures. We need each other. We need to build communities, not only in our schools, but in our villages, in our towns, and most of all, started by building community within our family and by supporting each other. The commitment to tradition as source of its story and vision. This is the tradition of our church and sacred scripture. Do we know our own story? Do we know the sacred story? And do we link our story with that sacred story? Do we help young people to do this? And it's appreciation of rationality and learning. And this is, of course, epitomized in its commitment to education. This is so important to us today in a world where there is fake news and where we and our young people are so bombarded by the media. Yesterday, Dr. Omar emphasized the need for critical thinking in the curriculum. This is vital to Catholic education and has always been part of Catholic education. Do we create thinking classrooms? It is a vital aspect of 21st century education. But Groom goes on to say that the following three characteristics are pervading characteristics of the school. Catholicism's commitment to people's personhood, to who they become, and their ethic of life. Here we come back to how do we build ethical, moral young people. And the commitment to basic justice, sadly absent in our world today. And do we teach young people to be able to identify injustice, to recognize it, and then to understand what they should do about it? And of course, Catholicism's commitment to Catholicity, a universal concern, a concern for all peoples. We can think about how we felt when we saw pictures of that baby lying on the beach after the refugees drowned. The fact that people have to leave their countries to find a better life. And you are, I'm sure, much closer to this than we are in South Africa, although we also have our share of refugees. One of our schools has a wonderful project called the 3 to 6 project. When school is over for the day, at 3 o'clock, another whole cohort of children who are refugee children come in and are taught to be able to get them to catch up on what they lost during the years of their refugee time, their travels. And they tell some harrowing stories. In fact, we've got it at 2 schools now, not just 1 school. Those are both quite well-resourced schools, and this is how they are carrying out the call to be concerned for all people. So once again, we link to our universality, but also to the theme of your conference, Catholic schools as clubs of integrity. Another major aspect of our universality are the religious congregations who started schools across the world. These congregations founded in schools in many lands, and often at the behest of the local bishop. I work with a congregation, and I've worked closely with them for a number of years, and we had a meeting the other day, and they were presenting how many schools they founded, and I discovered that they'd founded many more schools than the 6 they now have, and those schools continue to operate, and they did it at the request of the local bishop, and the idea was always to give quality education. This dedication and service has been an example to us and is a model for us to copy. Today there are some 210,000 Catholic schools in the world. Many schools in many lands, speaking many languages. And important and indeed important to us to keep and indeed develop our bonds with other countries as we walk the education path is the International Catholic Education Office. In Rome in 2015, prior to the World Congress, Education Today and Tomorrow, Renewing Passion, this organization broke new ground. with the election of its first lay president and first woman, our own Augusta Mutungani. Where is she? We were very, very proud of her. Can you see that all the women present rushed up onto stage to have a photograph taken with her, because we were so proud to have a lay woman leader. And another groundbreaking aspect was the first lay Secretary General, Philippe Richard. This was the symbol of the conference, and I think you just might recognize the people in this picture. This was taken when we were waiting to hear Pope Francis speak. And this, can you see all those people there? There were thousands and thousands of people like you and I attending that Congress, giving us another indication of how wonderful it is to be part of the Catholic Education Network. And just for fun, I stuck that picture in, because that was Augusta and I at the conference. The International Catholic Education Office has permanent representation on UNESCO, UNICEF, the European Council, advocating for Catholic schools. It aims to have a true global representation through membership of the greatest number of countries. And this is being very hard worked at present. The Secretary General was in Thailand over the last few days, and I meant to put a picture up because there were just thousands of people that were at this conference. As part of international education, Catholic schools, together with the country in which they exist, have also been involved in the Sustainable Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals for Education aim to achieve universal primary education. Many developing countries have worked hard to ensure that girls and boys are enrolled in primary schools. But we have heard that there are two problems, especially in Africa. One is free education has sometimes made it very difficult for our Catholic schools to continue to operate with huge numbers. I think of Malawi here, where they don't have sufficient teachers to teach the thousands of children they have. And they have a lot of schools in Malawi. The other problem is that while children may be in school, what is the quality of the schooling? The bigger the class, the less the quality. I'm not sure what size average class you have here, but I know that in the primary schools, even in South Africa today, we have schools of 80 in grade 1, which is almost an impossible task. So the new Sustainable Development Goals aim to look at quality. Gender equality still needs to be achieved, but as you're going to be addressed in detail on Thursday, I will leave this topic there. I must note that some international trends can be harmful to the distinctive Catholic character of our schools. The imposition by the state of policies contrary to Catholic values and principles is a case in point. In South Africa, we have a new policy entitled HIV, TB, and sexually transmitted infectious diseases. And the policy has some really good parts about healthcare and mobile clinics and getting young people to get the care they need. However, some of its goals are contrary to the teachings of the Catholic Church. It advocates the distribution of condoms even in primary schools. My colleagues visited the ministry on Monday, and they say that the official concern said they will be discreet and will not force this on schools. Now, I don't know about in Kenya, but in South Africa, the man up there can say that, but what happens down on the ground is a very different thing. So officials could become more forceful about this. We shall wait and see and keep schools informed. The reason they give for this is that the only increase in HIV statistics is amongst young women between the ages of 16 and 24. And of course, this is of grave concern to all of us. However, I think that we are not exploring the reason for these girls being exposed to the virus. One of it is what they're now calling in South Africa blessers, which is a terrible name for a sugar daddy. Much older men buying young women, inveigling young women, as well as the fact that the research shows that many young women are forced into having sexual relationships. And another aspect is selling oneself for economic reasons. In other words, prostitution in an old word, but when great poverty is present, sometimes this is how young women see themselves feeding their families. However, South Africa is a very materialistic country, and often it is just to buy the good things of life. So we have great challenges around these areas. The Catholic Church in South Africa has a long and proud heritage of education. The first school, St. Augustine's Primary School, was established in Port Elizabeth next to the cathedral in 1847. Port Elizabeth is in the Eastern Cape, and that school is, I think it's 170 years today, if my maths is correct. I'm not a maths teacher. It was a school for children of white settlers, although mission schools were rapidly established from the 1850s. The scholar McGrath says, the church has always attached the greatest importance to education of the young, and alongside the church building, there always rises the school. I wish that was still true today in my country. It appears that from the beginning, a two-tier education system existed in the Catholic Church in South Africa. This can be described as schools for affluent whites and settlers, and missionary schools for the indigenous people. Fewer personnel were allocated to the latter schools. The institutions were mainly, though not exclusively, of poor quality. They were often treated in a paternalistic manner, and in general were entirely segregated from the white Catholic community. Education became differentiated along the lines of colour, with the state providing education for whites, while the education of blacks was largely in the hands of the missionaries of various religions. This two-tier system continues to be mirrored economically today in both the Catholic education network and in the education system as a whole. Initially, the church bore the financial burden of the schools, but before the apartheid regime, a system of state subsidization gradually developed. This enabled the church to build teacher training colleges and train a large number of lay teachers, which in 1953 numbered 6. Now the following slide compares 1956 to 2017. In 1956, you can see we had 6 training colleges. Today we have none. Although our Catholic University is starting to try and bring an education degree in, but they are suffering extreme economical restraints. So we're not sure how well that will go. These schools were both state-aided, which I suppose you call Catholic-sponsored schools, and today in South Africa we call these schools public schools on private property and private schools. The interesting thing is to look at the numbers. We had 740 schools with some 111,000 learners, and 16% of all the black schools were Catholic schools. Today we've got 341 schools and 174,000 learners. So the ratio is quite changed. The schools are much bigger, and perhaps it's something we really have to look at in detail to either get more schools or change the overcrowding. But it also is a sign that even today the Catholic schools are very popular because of their good results in our school leaving examination. In our schools, the statistic I haven't put up is that there are only 25% of the children Catholic in the whole country. Catholics are only a very small percentage of the country. And I don't have the figure with me for teachers, but it's probably about 30% of the teachers are Catholic. Now, think about that in relation to keeping the Catholic ethos alive. The rise of Afrikaner nationalism, and in 1948 they were voted into power, proved disastrous for black education. The belief that the Afrikaner, like the Israelites, were chosen by God and were superior to other races wreaked havoc in our land, the legacy of which we are still living to this very day, and I think will live for many, many more years. That is not to say that racism was not very present prior to this, but the Afrikaners institutionalized it. In 1953, and they passed the Bantu Education Act, which imposed the ideology of national Christian education on the schools. You may think that with the word Christian this was good, but when you realize what I said earlier, it was to make black people Christians, but in the image of how the Afrikaners saw it. Now, just to give you an idea, 1953 was the year of my birth. So from 1953 to 1994, this apartheid regime covered our land. We now expect in 20 years to overcome that, and it's an almost impossible task. The Afrikaners said, we want no mixing of languages, no mixing of cultures, no mixing of religions, and no mixing of races. Coming from a Calvinist background, they were very anti-Catholic. In fact, they called us die Romeinse Gevaar, which means the Roman danger. So there was not a lot of cooperation there. We do not have time to go into this in depth, but to suffice to say, the government took the subsidies away from the black mission schools. Our Catholic bishops were very foresighted at that time, and to try and keep their schools open, they had a huge fundraising campaign, and they raised £1 million to keep them open. Now, if you think about £1 million in today's money, I don't know how to work it out, but it's a great deal of money. The other churches largely let most of their schools go. And they often express regret on that today. The government's action gravely impacted the teacher training colleges until finally they were all closed. That is had another huge impact on us. In 1956, 3 years after the passing of this infamous Education Act, Father Trevor Huddleston, a renowned Anglican priest, said the following: "The Bantu Education Act is by far the more deadly in its effect." And he went on to say that it would take black people a generation or two to recover from its consequences. I think because of the number of years that it was in place, it's going to take us longer. And I think his prophecy is indeed being fulfilled. During 1976, when the young people of South Africa, starting in Soweto, protested against having to learn in the Afrikaans language, the education system became very fractured. And that has also led to some of the problems we have today, although that also led to our freedom. The 1960s and 70s proved tumultuous for Catholic schools. The inequality of how white and black schools were resourced both financially and the number of personnel took its toll on the quality of black education. In the Catholic situation, black teachers were underpaid, and there were less religious working in black schools. Very, very many religious. Only 300 of 2,400 religious sisters worked in black schools, and at that time, no religious brothers, although that changed later. The struggle to pay teachers led to many schools being handed back to the state, and then the teachers' salaries were cut unilaterally without consultation, creating a deep unhappiness in the schools. I must tell you that the inequality in the schools of which I speak exists to this day. We have schools that are right now in danger of closing because they cannot charge the fees they should. These are their private schools, not the public schools. A report on Catholic education in the 1970s, which was instigated by the leadership of religious congregations, highlighted the insolvency of black Catholic schools and the discrepancy of resources between black and white Catholic education. The injustice of separate schools became a deep concern among some religious congregations. The first schools to say we are taking children no matter what their race were two Dominican schools, the Irish Dominican schools. And in 1976, they admitted black pupils. And from then on, many of the schools were. These were the private schools that were congregation-owned. This defiance of the law led to ultimatums from the government, which were ignored. The bishops supported this move, and the term open schools was supported, as not all Catholics were happy with the schools admitting black pupils. By 1980, some 850 black pupils were in open schools, including our public schools. Sadly, many white parents were to withdraw their children from Catholic schools as more black pupils were admitted. The church once again mirroring South African society. Of course, the thing one needs to understand as well about the church in South Africa was because of the Group Areas Act, which only allowed certain races to live in different suburbs or regions, our parishes were segregated. So you were either in a white parish, a black parish, or a so-called colored parish, or even an Indian parish. Thankfully, that has changed with the new South Africa. Firstly, I need to tell you that our Catholic education structures in South Africa are very different to yours here in Kenya. We have so few schools compared to you, and we do not operate by diocese but by regions. In 1985, a service body was developed which aimed to support Catholic schools, focusing on teacher development. This body was called the Catholic Institute of Education and is the organization for which I work. Recently, we amalgamated other structures. We also had a CaSPA, but it wasn't the Catholic Schools Principals Association, but the Catholic School Proprietors Association, a group of owners, bishops and religious congregations who came together to negotiate with the new government around the Catholic schools. And we now have amalgamated that with the board of our institute to become the Catholic Board of Education, which is an associate body of the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference and is the oversight body for Catholic school and the governance structure of the Catholic Institute of Education. So in other words, they're our boss. The new South Africa changed much for Catholic schools. The negotiation I just mentioned was a very hard-won negotiation because of the Christian national education. The new government wanted to do away with any religion in schools. And so they didn't want Catholic schools to exist as they did, the public schools I'm talking about. However, through the negotiations, we now have the ability to have our distinctive Catholic character, and it is in the law and in the policies. However, it does take a lot of advocacy to educate government officials about these rights. Advocacy forms a large part of our work, and while at a national level we have excellent relations, it is at the provincial and district level that we struggle. The appointment of teachers to our public schools is a great challenge, in spite of us having certain rights. Union interference with appointments seriously hampers the appointment of suitable staff. In fact, there has been a huge scandal in the education system called Jobs for Cash. And we've had a report which has uncovered that principals' positions are sold as well as department positions. At the moment, that's sort of been kept very quiet because of the political issues around who was involved in it. And as South Africa enters its 24th year of freedom, the education system remains the single biggest concern across the public and private spectrum. In spite of large budgetary allocation, it is sad that the education system underperforms when compared to education in other countries, although researchers say that some improvement is now apparent. One of the reasons was the number of curriculum changes since 1994. These confused and demotivated teachers. When I was listening to Dr. Omar yesterday, I was thinking of how carefully this has to take place so that it's a smooth change and not a big muddle, because teachers who are used to doing things one way get very confused by new ways. We all do. Change is the most difficult thing for human beings to undergo. This has settled, this demotivation and muddle has settled in the past few years, and as I said, some gains are being made. This is a map of more or less where our schools are. You can see the greatest concentration is here in KwaZulu-Natal, and that was because it had the most mission schools. Pope Benedict's papal exhortation on the Church in Africa, Africa Munus, speaks of education on our continent, and it says the following. Solid foundations will be able to help them address the daily decisions arising in every adult life on effective social, professional, and political plane. It also clearly outlines the need for a literate society. As literacy levels are particularly low in our foundation phase, that is grades 1, 2, and 3, we also run literacy programs in some selected schools. The challenge with that is that there's so many different programs being offered in South Africa and around the world, is which one will be the most effective. And some very interesting research has just come out on this. And I wonder if you could think what would be the most helpful way to get teachers to teach literacy better. Luckily for us, it is what we're trying to do, maybe not in the same way, but it's helping the teachers in the classroom, doing model lessons, that sort of thing. So Africa Munis tells us that illiteracy represents one of the principal obstacles to development. It is a scourge on a par with that of the pandemics. True, it does not kill directly, but it contributes actively to the marginalization of the person, which is a form of social death, and it blocks access to knowledge. Teaching people to read and write makes them full members of the res publica and enables them to play their part in building it up. For Christians, it provides access to the inestimable treasure of the sacred scriptures that nourish their life and faith. So that's very strong words from the Synod, the African Synod. And I suppose that this is one of our main tasks, is making literate young people. In spite of the struggles in our primary schools, our high schools perform very well. And it is our high schools that outperform other schools, getting significant higher marks and with more school leavers able to go to university. However, in the country, there is a 50% dropout of children leaving school. And this leaves some 7.5 million young people between the ages of 15 and 34 unemployed. Many of these people are referred to as NEETs, not educated, employed, or in training. And it's here that the church's skill centers offer courses to try and give these young people skills. It's a complicated story, and it doesn't affect schools, except in that schools have to try and keep the children in school. Our institute also serves the skill centers. Religious education is central to our work, and we have developed curricula for primary and high school. However, we have a major challenge of severe lack of religious education teachers. Even Catholic teachers seem unwilling to teach RE, in spite of courses offered. The curriculum in our public schools also makes the timetabling of religious education difficult and is a challenge for the principals of the public schools. In the independent schools, it isn't. In 2012, we began running what we call child safeguarding, and you call child protection. Tell me I've got 5 minutes and I'll have a few pages more. Anyway, what we did, when we ran these workshops, the short story is that we discovered the teachers were still engaging in corporal punishment in a big way, in spite of it being outlawed since 1996. And although private schools don't use, the more well-resourced private schools don't use corporal punishment, they use other forms of abuses, put-downs, calling children names, deriding them. Anyway, as a result of this, we also discovered that the abuse challenges were cyberbullying, cyber sexual abuse, abuse by children on other children, and illicit relationships between teachers and young girls. Getting schools to report on this is especially difficult when it involves teachers. Teachers do not want to report on each other. One of my colleagues thinks it might be that people do not want to be regarded as what was called impimpis during the apartheid times, those who cooperated with the police. We are currently surveying children in grades 6 and 7 to see their experience of school. We did one survey last year, and at the moment we're carrying out the second one. And to our horror, we discovered that 52% of teachers are still hitting children. And our visit to the ministry on Monday confirmed that their research shows the same statistics. So to overcome this, we developed a program that looks at putting restorative practices in place instead of retributive. And it basically builds on improving communication. We've called it Building Peaceful Catholic Schools. It aims to teach teachers to improve their communication and conflict management skills, as well as introducing them to restorative justice. This is a way to change to a more merciful way, and the basis of it is peace begins with me. Do I have a heart of peace? And how can I make things right? Going along with that, we have three themes so far. The first was bullying, and that was a poster that we produced for the Preventing Bullying time. This circle time is a way to teach children to communicate differently. In the circle, we get children to listen, to develop respectful relationships, to become more empathic, put things right, understand fairness, take responsibility, and speak from their own experience. This is this year's theme of affirming identity, challenging racism. We are all made in the image of God. Guard each other's dignity. And the one on the right is the preamble to our Constitution, which is very beautiful. And in fact, lots of people are trying to get all South Africans to understand the preamble. And you'll see that, I don't know if you can read around the edge, may God protect our people in all the languages of South Africa. Gender-based violence is also rampant in our country. And I won't go into any details about that. Suffice to say that we had a Deputy Minister of Higher Education, a young man, be captured on video beating out 2 young women because he didn't like what they said to him. It took him 2 weeks to resign. So we're really struggling with that. We're struggling with racism in a very big way. And next year, our theme is xenophobia, as we have experienced terrible incidents of xenophobic violence, largely because South Africans get jealous of the success of other Africans. A great tragedy and shame for all South Africans who care. It is a wave of corruption that has really, is really the worst thing happening to us right now. And without us teaching young people that corruption is wrong, that bribery is wrong, that, I mean, it's at all levels of our society. And the President is at the heart of it all. The way he fired the finance minister has led to us being downgraded by the rating agencies, and we could say our country is in a recession while other countries are flourishing. Lest I paint too bleak a picture, there have been some gains. School feeding and child care grants have reduced malnutrition. We have carried out a pilot health screening program, which has shown that this really works. And we are now telling the government about it so that they can see how it works. We also were given deworming medication for low-fee independent schools during the rollout of the state schools deworming. Other work we do is developing leadership, and as you all know, authentic ethical leadership is the foundation of any school. We support our principals by facilitating forums in regions as well as one-on-one coaching. Our call as teachers is, as 1 Peter says, to always be accountable to the hope that is within us. And these final words from Pope Francis remind us how important teachers are. I remember my first teacher, that woman, that teacher I had when I was 6 years old in first grade. I have never forgotten her. She is why I loved school. I visited her throughout her life until she passed away. And I leave you that with the thoughts that we never know just how much we affect the children, for good and for bad. So let us remember that we belong to a great group of teachers who teach in Catholic schools around the world, that we have the power to nurture and build young people who will leave our schools as women and men of integrity, who will build a better, more just world. And let us teach peace. Thank you.